Welcome to another banging episode of Borderless Mentality. Hey, hope you're loving the new look, the Afro look, promoting Africa again. It's new look and everything that we do African over here. Okay, let's get into it. Today I want to talk about charismatic churches and the rise of charismatic churches. Now, church as we know it, or religion as we know it, has always been a Western phenomenon, right? Or a Western ideology, a Western idea, right? But the truth of the matter is, we've all had our fair share or our own form of religion, whether it was spirituality, or it was just faith, or it was just atheism, or we just believed in a higher power. It was just a belief system that we had. We all had our different forms of worship, so to speak, right? But over the last decade or so, the rise of charismatic churches has really taken off in Africa. Now, I can talk about South Africa because I live here and I see it on almost every street where there's a vacant building. You will find a charismatic church. Now, there's nothing wrong with having so many churches in one square mile or 1 kilometer, whatever you want to call it, measurement you use in your country, right? There's nothing wrong with having 4 or 5 churches next door to each other, blaring out the word of the Lord, blaring out this and blaring out their prosperity gospel, whatever you want to call it. The problem with charismatic churches and the rise in the number of charismatic churches brings the question of criminality and criminal activity into question. Some, if not a lot of these churches, are being used as money laundering facilities, right? Some of these churches are also used as human trafficking services for young women and young girls, as was proven by Pastor Omotoso's recent trial in South Africa, right? It's said that the government allow so many foreigners to come in with the charismatic churches and the preaching, and they're using backdoor tactics and they're using the church to hide these backdoor tactics that they're doing behind the scenes that you do not get to see. Now, what I'd love to see, though, is a crackdown on these charismatic churches, because part of the problem, of the criminal problem in South Africa, is partly due to these charismatic churches. Now, a lot of people may argue with me and say, like, no, that's not true. These churches don't do that. Here's a question for you. I know for a fact that a lot of these charismatic pastors or preachers have multiple women in their lives. Some have wives, and then they have girlfriends on the side that they take from the church. Some of these charismatic leaders, church leaders, are not even married, and then they actually go through a slew of these congregants, young ladies, and they use the word of God to brainwash them and tell them the Lord has chosen you to come and do this and that, in private with the pastor. And a lot of things happen behind closed doors, you know what I mean? And the fact of the matter is, we just look at it from face value. We just look at it at face value, that it's a church, it's a pastor, he's driving a nice car, nice clothes, nice that, and not knowing that the pastor is a man like any other man with needs, and the fact that the pastor can actually use the word of God to lure these young women into his lair. For me, I think that is wrong. That is just totally wrong, And a lot of this prosperity gospel, these charismatic churches, they just have an agenda which comprises of 2 things: make money and get women. That's the only 2 things I know. If you look at it, I promise you, a lot of these charismatic churches are attended by a lot of single women. A lot of these charismatic churches have young girls, beautiful young girls at that, beautiful young girls, always attending to the pastor and always having calls from the pastor. I know of women that get late night calls from the pastor. I mean, if your church is only happening on a Sunday, why are you in contact with your pastor every day? You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense. You get it? So, charismatic churches as a whole, it's a whole criminal element that goes into it. There's the drug element that some say churches are being used as drugs. money laundering, obviously human trafficking. And there's proof to this because Pastor Amatoso's case has opened a can of worms. So we may look at it and just say, nah, it can't be everybody. And sure enough, it may not be everybody. But when one church opens up a can of worms, it paints the other churches with the same brush. And everybody looks at it in the same way. Just like when foreigners commit a crime, you don't blame just the criminal foreigners. You blame now all the foreigners. You look at them all in the same light, even though it's wrong. But that's the way humans are built. You understand what I mean? We always have this tendency to want to always look for someone else to blame.